Thank you for joining today's event. Getting the Job 101 is sponsored by the Iowa Work-Based Learning Coordinators and hosted by the Iowa Intermediary Network. We really want to thank our special guests today from Iowa Workforce Development and Future Ready Iowa. We appreciate you being our expert panelists. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, our intermediary coordinator, who's going to moderate our discussion. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you very much, Gina, for the introduction. Welcome, guys, and thanks again for being here. Let's go ahead and just jump right in. Kathy, we'll start with you. So if you want to go ahead and just introduce yourself, maybe talk about your education and like your current position right now.
Sure. Kathy Leggett. My position is the Future Ready Iowa Policy Advisor. I work at Iowa Workforce Development, and I've been doing this job for about 4 years now. So I work statewide. Prior to this, I worked 20 years at Blank Children's Hospital in Des Moines. And my education is been my formal institutional education has been a bachelor's degree at the University of Northern Iowa in community health education, a master's degree in health education at UNI, and then a master's degree in public administration at Drake. But that has served me very well. But I want to say one of the exciting things I think about today's the time we're living in today is there are so many other options to get education and training and to get that great job. And just different options for everyone. And so just please keep that in mind, earn to learn, registered apprenticeships, certificates, diplomas, 2-year degrees, all kinds of things. So options are immense and to find your really great career. So.
Thank you. That was great. Angie, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Angie Quinn. I work here at Iowa Works, which is a part of the Iowa Workforce Development umbrella. I've been here for 3 years. I have a bachelor's degree in social work from the University of Northern Iowa. So go Panthers.
Go Panthers.
Yeah. So before this, I have a lot of extensive background just helping families kind of be self-sufficient in the community on several different levels. So this is just a new type kind of as I get into this role, but a career planner helping people find jobs, create resumes and find careers.
And my name is Austin Munaz. I'm also a career counselor here at Iowa Works. I have been working here for about 3.5 years. I started out in the Promise Jobs department, and Angie and I have been working together for the last few years as career counselors. Prior to that, I was a Polk County DHS worker working with children who had come to the attention of the state of Iowa for one reason or another regarding child abuse. And so I was able to help alleviate some of those concerns. And I was able to transition over after I had gotten as much as I could out of that job, I think. And so being able to transition to Iowa Workforce Development and really figure out a new way to help people. And I completely agree with what Kathy said. If I knew about all the opportunities that existed now 15 years ago, then I wouldn't maybe looking to be paying back as much as I am. And so one of the phrases I've liked to use during this pandemic since I've been at IWD is college isn't the only way. And if I can't pay for my kids' future, I can absolutely help set them up with a lot of avenues that exist that is exciting for the future of the workforce, because that's what we're doing is we're trying to rebuild the workforce, in my opinion, and it starts with those sophomores and juniors in high school. And I think my friend Angie would agree.
Awesome. Very good. Guys, I just got to tell you, I agree 100%. I find myself saying that a lot. I wish I would have had those opportunities and I wish I would have known that because my path might have been a little different, right? So very good advice. Thank you. Let's go ahead and jump into some questions. Angie, we're going to start with you. What advice do you give someone? So when they come in, and what advice would you say, whether it's full-time or part-time, for a position, for a job, what advice would you give them?
I think the first thing is you just have to go into it with a positive attitude. Positivity breeds positivity, negativity breeds negativity. And so that's the first step. It's just that positive attitude. But then another thing that you need to make sure to have is a resume, a good, solid resume that's going to really highlight all of the accomplishments you have. And it doesn't even have to be a work-related accomplishments. We can always find a way to turn life events that you have had into a good, solid resume. Might just not be that one that we're used to, that chronological, that normal resume we're used to seeing. And so that's where we kind of come in and like to change things up a bit.
I would, if you don't mind, I would just add too, you stay in a job a lot longer if you like what you do each day, as opposed to just clocking in and clocking out at the end of the day. And so find something that you like. If you need to take an assessment like at Iowa Works or through Future Ready Iowa to figure out what you like to do, not what you can do. Those assessments are absolutely out there. And I think it's important, again, to figure out what is it that you like to do. I think Angie hit the nail on the head with that, that positivity. Attendance is the number one reason that people lose jobs. Show up to work on time and show up ready for work. Have those, be able to be teachable. It's one thing to have the soft skills to be able to show up to work on time and be able to have a positive attitude, but at the same time, show that you can be teachable and show that you're willing to learn.
Yep, I completely agree. Thank you. And this kind of leads us into our next question. So, Kathy, we'll go ahead and start with you. As an employer or like a boss, a manager, what qualifications do they look for in someone? So you guys had mentioned a couple, but are there others?
Yes. And it's I think you might hear some themes throughout this because yes, they mentioned some good ones really. And what I'm sharing comes from the framework of that I get to listen to employers all across the state as they're facing challenges in hiring, or they're sharing what they're doing and what they're looking for. And so from listening to so many employers, there are some key things. Austin hit one of them, and I have to hit it again because it's show them that you are a learner. You are ready to learn. You're willing to learn. I hear that so much. And the other thing I'm going to add to that is a problem solver. They're looking for somebody who's willing to. It doesn't mean you always have the answer, but is willing to be a problem solver. That's very important. Communication. I want to add that. And in so many ways, we talked just before this about a kind of an epidemic that's happening across Iowa, where people get interviews and then they don't show up, they don't communicate back, or maybe they even they say they're going to go to an interview and then they just don't show up, or they get offered a job and they don't communicate back. And all of that is part of communication, whether you want the job or not. Be a respectful communicator and get back to people. Be reliable. Communication is huge. And if you're saying, gosh, I'm worried about this, you need to communicate that. Learn how to communicate that with your team or your boss or whatever, instead of just don't show up or think you can't do this. So communication is key with teamwork. And as I said, problem solving, a willingness to learn, and hitting again on what Angie said is, I think a positive attitude. I think if you show passion and interest in an interview, you're going to have a leg up because they want that. So show that positive attitude, that interest, and willingness to learn with the other things.
Sure, for sure. Can I add to that? With that interview process, one thing that we talk about, especially me when I have gone into some of the schools and talked with kids, actually Austin and I both do the A game training, and we go into some of the high schools. And the one thing we say is, like, when does that interview start? That interview starts like the minute you pull into that parking lot, because you never know who is looking. You never know who you're going to interact with. So leaving that cell phone in the car, being attentive, making sure that you are on your A game and ready to show your best self to that employer.
Wow, what wonderful advice, guys. Another thing I wish I would have known back in the day. So thank you for all
Yes.
And it's pretty cool, Kathy, like you said, you're hearing this from businesses. Like this is what, you can't get any more raw than that. So thank you very much.
And yeah, just to top on that, businesses a lot of times say, now this isn't going to be everywhere, but employers a lot of times say, if somebody has these skills that we just talked about, I can teach them what they need to do. So don't go, if you haven't done it before, present yourself as somebody ready and willing to learn. And that can really give you a good heads up. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Okay, Austin, we're going to go ahead and go with you for the next question. What things might make job seekers nervous about the process in general?
Yeah, so I really think that we never know what a job seeker is going through. And so maybe when they walk in our office, they just possibly lost their job they've been at for X amount of years. And so they're nervous about what that next step looks like. Or of course, bills is always something, the next paycheck to be able to pay those bills. That's always something that makes someone nervous. where do you look for work? Unfortunately, long gone are the days where a good handshake and a good conversation lands you a job. 90% of the jobs roughly are going to be online. And so are you looking in the right spots online? Some job platforms are okay, but did you know that going directly to the company's site is going to get you a lot better results if you're going to that site and applying for a job through that site rather than maybe just clicking the apply now button on Indeed or going through only a job platform. And so really where to look for work can sometimes be cause anxiety for folks and I think job seekers. But then maybe the biggest anxiety is that interview. Why do we think interviews are awkward? Well, we're supposed to talk about ourselves and kind of brag about ourselves for a little bit. And that's kind of hard to do because we're supposed to be somewhat humble. And how do we do that without sounding cocky and arrogant? Well, you practice and you understand what the job is that you're interviewing for. And so whether it's not knowing where to look for work or how to actually apply for the job, or once you get the interview, actually preparing for the interview and being ready for those questions, which can be intimidating. I think those are a lot of anxieties that Iowa Works can definitely help alleviate, but there can be a lot that goes into that.
Thank you very much. And that kind of leads us into our next question. Kathy, if you want to start, then we can see if the others have stuff. Well, what can someone do to stand out? And you guys have mentioned a lot of really good skills and qualifications, but is there anything else someone can do? If there's 10 people trying to get the same job in that waiting room, what can that one person do to stand out?
One thing that I want people to think about, and I think can help them stand out, is do your research before you go to the interview. Research the company's website. If you know people who have worked there or interacted with them, talk to them and learn more about it so that you can integrate that into your interview. Well, I saw on your website that you really care about this or what, and I really feel that way too. Do that I think can give you definitely a heads up and stand out as compared to people who maybe didn't do that. So I think that's one thing. I think your ability to share examples when you're saying, you're a problem solver, you're a good communicator, or they're asking you about that, give them an example. Like, well, just last year at school, I had to do this, or just, it doesn't have to be at a job. It could be, like you said, in anywhere. But be prepared with some real world examples that show the skills that you're talking about. So those are a couple of things.
Great, thank you. Angie, Austin, did you guys have anything to add? I didn't want to skip over you.
Yeah, for sure. First, I want to say, Kathy, you stole mine because that's totally the one I was going to say. I always am like, research that company. There's so many reasons why. You want to make sure it's a good fit. But the other thing I'll definitely say is make sure you have questions to ask them.
Yes.
An interview is not just them trying to learn you. You also have the ability to learn them, especially in today's world. Like, it's not all about the employer getting to pick anymore. We know that there is shortages of employees. And so this is kind of your prime time to make sure that this job is going to fit your desires, your needs. And so don't be afraid to ask questions, make sure that, again, like Austin said, if you're not happy there, you're not going to stay. That's a waste of that employer's money and time. And so we want to make sure it's a good fit.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of what Kathy and Angie have said, I think, how do you stand out with your resume as well? Because I always ask folks, what's the point of a resume? The most common answer I get is, well, it gets you a job. And I love it because it's wrong every time. It doesn't get you a job. It gets your foot in the door so that you can then have that interview to sell yourself for another 45 minutes to an hour about why you're right for the job. The research you've done, like Kathy said, why you're a good fit for that company, both skill wise and culture wise. I think that's important these days, is definitely to make sure, and I wouldn't say it's important these days. I say it's important all the time, but it's been more emphasized these days is the culture that you're working in. Is it a good fit for you? Is the idea of being psychologically safe in your work environment where you spend literally a third of your life? Is that going to be somewhere you're comfortable and you feel like you can do well there? And so I think that resume is important for how you stand out to be able to get that job interview. And how do you help your resume stand out? Well, you make sure you meet the minimum qualifications. And then there's also certain things like National Career Readiness Certificate or the NCRC, various certifications or credentials that maybe would be considered electives in that job as opposed to requirements. And so can you get some of those electives or some of those credentials like the NCRC that would maybe help you stand out a bit more rather than the folks that are interviewing for the job behind you, like Kathy had said, and like Megan had kind of given the example of a lot of people vying for that job. How do you stand out? Let's talk about your resume. Let's talk about the research you've done on the company, and let's talk about those interview skills that you're bringing to that interview.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That was a great discussion. Let's go on to the next. Angie, we'll start with you, and then if you guys want to jump in, go ahead. What are some things that someone can do when they are interested in that job position to know that they can secure it? So what is something they can do to secure something that they really want to do, they're compassionate about?
Yeah. So I think there's a few different things. I mean, definitely if they've had that interview, following up that communication piece, just making sure that their name stays in that employer's head, following up, following through. Maybe if they're a little unsure, like they don't have a lot of experience, but they really know where they want to go, try volunteering, doing some on-the-job training, trying to really boost up their knowledge of the area to get into that long-term career. We are lucky that right now, there's, Earn and Learn, Future Ready Iowa. There's so many different programs out there that are helping individuals who maybe college is not the right choice, to be able to learn different careers. And it's a great way to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And so I think, just kind of touching your toes in the water and figuring out what that is.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Angie said, I don't have a ton to add other than if you're not sure if you like that occupation, maybe don't go get 4 years of schooling and then get the job. Maybe you, like she said, you volunteer there. Is there someone that that works at a company or does the job that you're trying to do? Have that conversation with them. Maybe job shadowing.
Yes.
Kathy talked at the beginning about registered apprenticeships and apprenticeships in general. That's a huge push for Iowa. And it's always been there, but it's just I think a lot of folks and Iowa Workforce Development's trying to get the word out. This is a really good way for employers to bring on good candidates, educate good candidates, and train good candidates who like and want to do that job, the registered apprenticeship piece. And that's definitely something that I would say to look into if you're unsure. There's options out there that doesn't necessarily mean you have to take that job right away. You can explore.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's the same thing with us. We try to say, hey, you can start with a job shadow to see if you're interested. There are other, opportunities you can do to get your foot in the door and see if you like it before you spend all that time and money, right? So,
absolutely. And just kind of piggybacking off what Angie said about following up after you get the interview, one of the questions that I like to encourage folks to ask is, when do you have a time frame about when you might anticipate offering the job? Do you anticipate multiple, second interview or third interview? And so based on that answer from the employer, if they're offering the job in maybe a couple of weeks, well, you might want to kind of gauge your time frame to follow up with that employer around that time. You might not want to follow up the very next day because they still have 2 more weeks of maybe interviews to do. Maybe you wait a week, you give that phone call, thank them for their time, remind them you're interested in that position. And then again, that just kind of plants that seed for how hopefully good your interview went. If they're going to offer the job in the next 3 days, maybe you do follow up in about 36 hours because again, you have an idea of when that job's going to be offered and you want to make sure you express your interest and remind them, I'm thankful for the interview. I appreciate that opportunity and I am definitely interested in this position.
Austin, too, I was going to ask you, I'm sure you guys work with this a lot, but I hear a lot of times where a student or somebody will say, do I send up a follow-up email or thank you? Do you guys hear that a lot? Or maybe Kathy, do you hear that ever? Like a lot of the times people don't know how to follow up and you talked about time frame, which is very good, but what are you hearing about that of what's the best way to follow up?
Yeah, I think the most common answer is your email and your phone call, right? I mean, that's relatively simple to do, and it's pretty common, but it's not as personable as, say, a thank you card, a blank thank you card, a box of them in your car, and maybe you have that at the end of the interview to bring them, or maybe a day or two later you come back to the business. You give them that thank you card. It's tangible. They can take it. They can put it up maybe where their office space is, and that'll be that much more of a reminder when they go to offer that job. Like, hey, that person, followed up, did this extra thing, and they were a great candidate. Maybe I'll give them an offer, but definitely phone call and email based on the time frame about when they might offer that job.
Great, thank you very much. All right, on to the next question. What are some things a job seeker can do to make them a better candidate? And I know we've kind of talked about that, but do you have anything else to add? Whoever wants to jump in and just start with that one.
I love the idea of the research and making it a personable conversation in the interview. I have an example of a gal who was interviewing for a job, and she did research, and she saw that company had done not-for-profit work in Africa for the same in the same country that she had done for the Job Corps, the Peace Corps, or something that she had talked about in her example. And that has stuck with me ever since she told me that, because what a way to relate the job that you're applying for to the business that you are interviewing with, and to share that connection. And I think that's huge. And so Kathy hit the nail on the head when it comes to doing your research on the company and visiting the business. If you have the opportunity to visit the business, go and help make that much more of a connection.
The one thing that I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation related to those things is there's so many opportunities online today to take a course for free, or participate in an online, podcast or a webcast about how to do something, and as you do those, think about how those might be a connection or something for you to share in an interview. I took it upon myself because I just was so interested in this. So I completed these 3 modules or something, or I looked this up, and I really, if there's a connection, because there are so many ways to gain some additional knowledge or skills at our fingertips that can, I think, help show that you are independent and a good candidate.
It's important to remember to be yourself as well. I think we can get really rigid. I think we can get really uptight. And of course, if that's the case, and that's how we're being in the interview, we need to be professional, of course, but it's important to be ourselves. So hopefully we're going to be ourselves 8 hours a day.
That makes me think of mock interviews. It's always good, right, to do a practice mock interview before that initial email. Just get some nerves going. And I know we talked about resumes, but I didn't know, what about cover letters, guys? That wasn't mentioned. Is that an important thing to also have?
Yes, it is, for sure. Because that cover letter, not only is it that first, hey, I'm interested, but it's also like, hey, I'm interested, but look at all of these awesome things about me that is going to pique your interest to pull me into your office. And so it's, highlighting some of those really good things about you to pull you in. It's another part that sometimes is hard for people, because you got to brag about yourself. You got to sound good. But it is an important piece, because that is where you're really talking about, hey, I want to meet you face to face. I want to get a chance to talk to you about how great I am. And so, yeah, it is important.
And I completely agree with Angie. I think that it's important to have a good structured cover letter. Again, employers are getting through resumes and cover letters pretty quickly because they have a stack this big. They want to get down to this size so they can figure out who they're giving interviews to. And if your cover letter is not professional, like your resume, or if it's too wordy, maybe it's going to get put into the not look at pile. And so really having a good cover letter, but if you're only able to send one document to a job, it better be that resume, because show that you can follow direction number 1, send the document that they're asking. And if there's a spot for a cover letter and they're requesting your resume and maybe even references, which never belong on your resume, by the way, then send the document that it's asking for. And if it's only one, it better be that resume, because it has a lot more information on. But if you have the option to send a cover letter, that's important. Just make sure it's a professional one and we can help.
Very good advice. Thank you. I think you cleared up that question. That's always something that I hear students ask. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do one last question here. Can we kind of talk about social media and job searching on social media? Can you guys touch about that topic?
Yeah, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. So job searching, okay, so do you mean like looking for jobs or the effect that social media can have on trying to find a job?
Can
Like
you do
your
both?
social.
Can you kind of sum up
Yeah,
both
yeah.
points? Okay.
Yeah. So I do a few workshops. Austin and I actually do a few workshops, and we always touch on how social media can affect your employability. And so if you are someone who likes to dabble in Facebook and Twitter, and we live in a very hypersensitive society. And so if you are someone who likes to air your personal life on social media platforms, it might be a great idea to have two different accounts. One that is attached to your name, and that is your business account. That is going to show you like a very clean cut, ready to go individual, while this other one who has maybe a different name, a nickname, not anything to do with Angie Monday through Friday, I like to say, but maybe this is mom on the weekends. And so you're never going to know that mom on the weekend is Angie Monday through Friday. And they're not going to have any of the same people. I'm going to look very put together so that I can find. So when somebody Googles my name, they're going to see only the good version and not the fun version. And as I tell my 17-year-old, once you put it out there, you can't get it back. You don't know who's taking a picture of a picture. You don't know who's recording you. And so you just have to be really careful because it really could affect you finding that next job, that next career. And definitely if you doubt me, Google it. There's tons of examples out there of people who were making way above six figures and have lost jobs because of things they did in front of a camera or took pictures. And as simple as a guy in a Chick-fil-A line yelling at some poor teenage girl because of their background choices. And so there can be a lot of consequences to that.
Yeah.
Touch on the other side.
I would just, piggyback on and say, definitely know what's out there, know what you're putting out there, know what people are saying about you, because you can't control whether you're tagged in a photo or there's a status update about you. Google yourself, know what's out there as far as pictures and other social medias that maybe you've been tagged in. But if you're going to use social media to job search, I still would say that going to the company's site and looking for work and looking for jobs directly to the company's site is going to give you the best results. But that being said, LinkedIn is the best social media site for job seekers, for professionalism. Of course, your Facebooks and your MySpaces and your Snapchats, those are all fun and social. But if you're going to have a professional account, and I would say the LinkedIn account would be something that you would want to do. And I think Kathy was talking about it earlier. You can connect with employers through LinkedIn. You can connect with people that are looking to try to give you a job through LinkedIn. Yep. They could offer you a job and communicate with you through LinkedIn. And if you don't communicate back with them, LinkedIn learns that about you. LinkedIn understands if you're not going to communicate with people. And then that eventually comes out to recruiters that you don't communicate back. And so they're probably going to pass you over if you're not a good communicator, especially on that LinkedIn platform. And so, like Angie said, know what's out there about you on your social media. The Carson King example, I think, is the best one that I have for Iowa. That kid put a sign up and at a football game, I think, and then he had about a 2-week whirlwind of a ride that ended up going okay. But for a while, I think he was kind of having his name dragged through the mud because of things he put on social media from back in high school. But again, did he raise money and millions of dollars for University of Iowa? And so it worked out okay? Definitely. But was his life kind of on a roller coaster for a couple of weeks because of social media stuff? Absolutely. So just be careful what you're putting out there.
Yep.
Wonderful advice. Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here shortly. So I just wanted to Kathy, I was going to say, does anybody have any final last advice?
Thank you. You read my mind. A couple things that it may be a little random, but I wanted to throw out there. One thing, it's kind of maybe old school compared to the social media thing, but you're young, people are young, watch your driving record. The loss of a license or things on your driving record can affect your employability. And I think you don't think about, maybe you don't think about it as much maybe than later in life, but that is definitely something I hear from employers, is that's a barrier where people have had, whether it's arrests or tickets or, problems in that arena. So it does matter now, and it can affect your future. So I just wanted to mention that. The other thing is sometimes if you're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, then what I would challenge you to do is think about places you like. What stores do you like? What restaurants do you like? What images do you like of some place? I ended up working at Blank Children's Hospital because I loved that idea. And I went on their website and I looked for jobs. That's totally how that happened. Another job that I got one time, it was at a local restaurant and coffee shop. And it's because I loved the culture. I went in there and I worked all the time and I had meetings in there. And then at a time when I needed another job, I'm like, hey, you guys have an opening? Can I work here? So think about things like that too. It doesn't have to be all scientific. You can just start like, what do I like? And the other thing that I wanted to say is realize and take these opportunities that there is something to learn from every job. It may not be your favorite job. It may not be the job. It may be the job you're going to do for 3 months, but you can learn something from that job. If you are interacting with customers, you're developing those communication and customer and problem solving skills. If you're doing, cash register things, you're developing your money management and you can learn something and it will benefit you in the future if you phrase it that way. So those were my couple of final comments.
Thank you very much. That was awesome. Do you guys, Angie, Austin, I don't want to cut you guys off. Do you have any final last advice?
Do you have anything?
I would just kind of piggyback off of what Kathy said as far as barriers. That's what we try to do here at Iowa Works, is kind of work backwards. If you're running into an educational barrier, how can we help that? If you're running into a criminal history barrier, how can we help that? But yeah, absolutely. Whatever you can do to help yourself stand out, come and see us if we can help, because we want to help you overcome whatever those barriers are, because job searching can be intimidating and we want to help.
Thank you guys very much for the conversation. I learned a lot. Gina, I'm going to send it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much for expert panelists giving us so much great advice. I can't wait to get this out there. We have audience of middle school up to college students, so I'm sure this will be widely viewed. And awesome. We appreciate you and thank you for joining the Iowa Intermediary Network today.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.